Hi y'all! Cloudstone Curious here talking about brewing budget decks. I design fun decks that are designed to win at the $100 price range, excluding the price of the commander and basics. Prices are based on TCG player mid at the time of the deck's creation, so let's get to it! Today I'll be talking about my build for Golos Tireless Pilgrim. Golos Tireless Pilgrim is a 5 to cast legendary artifact creature scout. When Golos Tireless Pilgrim enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a land card, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. And for 2 colorless or 2 generic mana, 1 white, 1 blue, 1 black, 1 red, and 1 green, you may exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play them this turn without paying their mana costs. Golos is 3/5, and I'm pretty sure you know this card because this is definitely one of the most built, I think the most built cards, commanders, according to EDH Rec. But the thing about this deck is it's not really going to be about Golos. Golos is more of a spell in the command zone than a functioning commander because what this deck is all about is the World Tree. The World Tree is a land. It enters the battlefield tapped and taps for green, and as long as you control 6 or more lands, lands you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color. So you might be thinking that mana fixing, that color fixing is really good, and it is, but it's not what we're going for in this deck. What we're really after is the the second activated ability, which is for 2 white, 2 blue, 2 black, 2 red, and 2 green. Sacrifice the World Tree. Search your library for any number of God cards, put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Now, how can we fit all of those God cards in a $100 budget? Well, we're not, because what we actually need are the following. So our main win line for this deck is when you activate the World Tree and search for the gods, you will get these 4 creatures. Perforos, very clearly a god, and the 3 changelings shown here being, well, technically gods themselves. So what happens is we will be leveraging the champion mechanic on each of the changeling cards. So changeling titan, changeling hero, and changeling berserker. So how does champion work? Basically, they enter the battlefield. Changeling Titan will trigger and will attempt to exile Changeling Hero. Changeling Hero will also trigger and will attempt to exile Changeling Berserker. And Changeling Berserker will enter and attempt to exile Changeling Titan. So, with all of those triggers on the stack, we resolve the Changeling Berserker trigger first, and it exiles Changeling Titan. Then, the Changeling Hero trigger resolves and exiles Changeling Berserker. However, with the exile of Changeling Berserker, we bring back the Titan, at which point the original trigger doesn't even matter. The new Titan trigger for championing will go on the stack, and resolve, exiling the hero, and bringing back the Berserker, which then exiles the Titan, and you get the idea. It loops infinitely until you decide to not sacrifice anything or all your opponents are dead, because Perforos, once again, is on the field dealing 2 damage for every creature entering the battlefield. So it's an infinite loop on a budget deck, and very few people see it coming because the Changeling, Hero, Titan, and Berserker, they're not exactly very popular cards in Commander. But in case this doesn't work out, what are our alternate win lines? Well, first off, you can cast Impact Tremors, similar to Perforos, baby Perforos, if you will. And then cast any of the following spells. Martial Coup, which will create tokens. Decree of Justice, which will also create a bunch of tokens if you cycle or cast. Finale of Glory, which is also something that creates a lot of tokens. And finally, Storm Herd. So just a bunch of token generators for Impact Tremors, which can outright kill some of your opponents. And if not, then you just swing with a whole bunch of tokens. So the key to this deck is that it generates a lot of mana, and this is where you put all of that mana. Another win condition would be, because of all that mana, you can cast something like Death to the Deathless, which drains all of your opponents. Even if you can't close the game with Death to the Deathless, you can definitely put them in a really tough spot, really bad position, by basically draining their life and putting them at token range for damage. Or alternately, as with many Golos decks, Amaze's End victory is also possible. So let's talk about how we get these cards, how we get to these spells, and how we basically accomplish all that we want to accomplish. First up, let's talk about how you're going to play this deck. Take note that the deck is a Bant-based deck. So when I create 5-color decks, I don't necessarily use all 5 colors. I don't focus on casting all 5-colored spells. I choose 3 colors that I want to focus on. It keeps the mana base simple. It keeps your spell base sort of limited so that you don't go all over the place, and you can make sure that you can cast most of your spells. So keeping it at Bant gives you the draw of blue and green, the ramp of green, and the board control of white. It's not concerned with activating Golos. Unlike other Golos decks, you don't need the last ability. Again, a lot of these big spells are X spells, and Golos doesn't play well with X spells. It doesn't do extra turns. You don't need to activate it. It's just there so that you can more easily get the World Tree. You will be maintaining a minimal board state with this deck unless you're already on the cusp of winning. If you have a lot of tokens, then sure, but for most of the game, you'll mostly just be ramping and controlling the board. Another thing is you shouldn't try to get the World Tree too early. You don't want to telegraph that. You don't really need the fixing. If you've ramped properly, you won't need the mana fixing. The World Tree is there as a glass cannon, if you will. So protect the combo. Make sure that you have the spells necessary to protect the combo, or put your enemies in a position where they cannot respond, where they do not have the resources to stop you from going off. All right, let's talk about Mana Ramp. So for this deck, Mana Ramp, the focus will be lands. So you need to get as many lands into play as possible, getting the right colors. And let's look at some of the spells that we have. Soul Ring, of course. Soul Ring I like not because it's always there, but because it just lets you go to turn 2 and cast a 3-mana Kodama's Reach or Roiling Regrowth or any of the 3-mana spells that actually fixes your colors right away. And something that's often overlooked, and I really like as a ramp spell, is Growth Spasm. Growth Spasm reads, 2 colorless and 1 green, a sorcery. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Put a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token onto the battlefield. It has sacrifice this creature, add 1 to your mana pool. So this is really good because this actually it gives you 2 mana on the turn that you untap. So you have the mana that's available from the spawn, and of course the mana that you will get from the land that you ramped into. So if you cast this on, say, turn 2 because you have a turn 1 Soul Ring. So turn 1 Soul Ring, turn 2 Growth Spasm, and let's say you play another land. When you untap for turn 3, you get the land from Growth Spasm. You get the land from turn 1, the land from turn 2, 2 mana from Soul Ring, 1 mana from the Eldrazi spawn, and the land drop for the turn. So that's 7 mana available to you at turn 3. So there's a lot of things you can do already with that mana. Of course, Growth Spasm, the spawn goes away after you've cracked it, but that's just part of the game. If at worst you keep it around, if you don't need the mana right away, it's a chump blocker, or it's something that you'll find useful later on. So Circuitous Route is also here because of course, of the gates. Blighted Woodland is also here. I put it in ramp focus instead of in the utility lands, although it technically does count as a utility land. Next up, in terms of ramp, we can focus on mana doublers. So the following mana doublers are in the deck. These are the more affordable ones, dollar-wise. So Heartbeat of Spring, Dictate of Karametra, Zurta, Ancient, and Rude Awakening. Now, Rude Awakening is not technically a mana doubler, but it's there because it does allow you to untap the World Tree the turn that it comes in. So if you have the mana anyway, once the World Tree comes in, untap it, and you can activate the combo. Zurta Ancient is a beast, as you can see here. 3 colorless, 1 red, oh sorry, 3 generic, 1 red and 1 green. Creature beast. Whenever a player taps a land for mana, that player adds 1 mana to his or her mana pool of any type that land produced. So I know that all of these are symmetrical, and it's a bit dangerous to play mana doublers that are symmetrical, admittedly, but these are the cheapest in the deck, the cheapest available, dollar-wise. So you want to put them in because it does enable you to do a whole bunch of things. Heartbeat of Spring, for example, if you manage to untap with the World Tree, but you don't have enough lands, Heartbeat of Spring can definitely get you the combo very quickly. Next up, let's talk about card draw. So for card draw, I want to focus on instant speed and shuffle, and I'll get to that in a bit. So you have all of these card draw spells, 11 in total with Rites of Flourishing, helping, of course, everyone else, but also getting you the draw and getting you the land play that you need to get the combo off the ground. Now, the shuffle effect is very important because you don't want to draw into any of the 4 cards I mentioned earlier. You don't want to draw Perforos, you don't want to draw any of the changelings, because the goal is to keep them in the deck and activate the World Tree so that you can fetch those cards from the library. So you have cards like Dream Cache, Latinum's Legacy, See Beyond. All of these are designed so that you can shuffle, in case you draw them, you can shuffle the cards back into the library so you can fetch them using the World Tree. Targeted removal. Very important because you're not maintaining a board state. You need to be there to, these need to be there to basically fight off any threats that would be swinging your way. So when we talk about targeted removal, I like to focus on flexibility. Being flexible does cost something in some other regards in terms of dollar price or mana value. So that the mana value issue won't be that big of an issue because, again, we're ramping into a lot of mana. So here, Return to Nature. I like Return to Nature because it gives you the option of acting as a naturalize or acting as a way to remove problematic card in the graveyard. So it's a very good response to Reanimator effects. It's a very good response to stuff like Wonder or Brawn or Filth, anything in the graveyard that you want to remove. Return to Nature has that function. Of course, Beast Within, Generous Gift. We know what these cards are. And finally, Oblation. Oblation's really good for me because it targets basically any non-land permanent. You can get rid of it. And if it gets bad enough, you can actually target one of your permanents. If you have Golos, for example, you have Golos, you've cast him, and you've already gotten a land, but you want to cast Golos again. If you have the mana, cast Oblation on Golos, put it in the command zone, and then draw your 2. So it's also a draw spell in a pinch, but it does take care of a number of problematic cards, things that have indestructible, things like, a Darksteel Colossus, Blightsteel Colossus swinging at you. You can definitely take it out with an Oblation. Planeswalkers too, by the way, at the cost of your opponent drawing a couple of cards. So make sure that you're ready to make that trade. In terms of removal, there's also counter magic or protection. It doesn't really count as removal, but a threat that doesn't hit the board is a threat that you don't have to remove. So for this suite, we have Arcane Denial, Lassiter Plating, Negate, Saw It Coming, Unwind, and Commit to Memory. So Unwind only targets non-creature spells, definitely not as flexible, but it does let you untap the World Tree. So let's say you're able to put the World Tree into play, pass the turn, someone casts a spell, you unwind it, you can untap the World Tree, and then activate it before end of turn, getting the combo off. So that's why it's there. It's an additional ability for the card. I also like Commit to Memory, and I put it here. One, because it's a response. The commit side is a response to problematic spells or permanents. But also the memory side lets you shuffle the cards in case you draw. Again, in case you draw Perforos or any of the changelings, it lets you draw the cards, lets you shuffle the cards back into your library. Last of the Plating is good, as it's just an all-around good card for protecting you. Now let's go into board wipe. As I said, you're not really maintaining a board presence with this deck. So board wipes can be cheaper dollar-wise because they have to be more symmetrical. Or they can afford to be symmetrical because you don't really have a board. So for board wipes, I want to focus on flexibility, being able to hit a variety of permanent types or even all permanent types. So stuff like Martial Coup, as I mentioned earlier, if you put enough mana into it, it's a functional board wipe. Gaze of Granite, it hits practically everything if you have enough mana, which we usually will have. Cleansing Nova, it's 5 CMC or 5 mana value. You need 2 white to cast it, but it does give you the flexibility of choosing between creatures or artifacts and enchantments. Sometimes you're not really in danger, but everyone's ramping out of control. They have all their mana rocks. They have, all of their dorks. So casting Cleansing Nova will set them back significantly, allowing you to keep up with everyone else. Fortunate Few, I really like as well because it's a very political card. Fortunate Few is 3 generic and 2 white sorcery. Choose a non-land permanent you don't control. Then each other player chooses a non-land permanent he or she doesn't control that hasn't been chosen this way. Destroy all other non-land permanents. So if there's a very clear arch enemy, you can talk with your opponents and say, hey, there's nothing on my board to save. I'm going to choose some of your stuff. You can choose this other guy's stuff, this other player's stuff, and basically fix the odds so that the arch enemy keeps nothing. So it's a good effect. It's very good politically. It will help you maintain your maintain parity at the very least. In case you're losing, you cast this and it doesn't feel as bad for everyone because they get to keep something. You're not really affected by this. Even if you have Golos and they don't choose Golos, that's fine. You actually do want Golos in the command zone. So in case you need to cast it again to get another kind of land, in case you're going for the Maze's End victory, Golos is there. And finally, Austere Command, because Austere Command is just a really good board wipe for the dollar value. Next, Enablers. So enablers are cards that basically allow you to go off and pull off the combo or do your win line. So first off, recursion. Now, if you notice, there's a lack, I suppose. There's not enough targeted removal, or maybe you'd like more card draw. Well, that's where recursion comes in. You know how in Commander they say that tutors basically function as a second copy of the card? Recursion is basically graveyard tutors. So they're basically graveyard tutors. So you have cards. You have the following cards: Wildest Dreams, Regrowth, Road of Return, and Balaged Recovery. These are very important in case somebody wants to take out your world tree. So that's one use for them. Balaged Recovery, of course, very useful because if you have a very good hand but you don't have enough lands and you have this in your hand, you can actually play it as a or as a green mana source, not as a forest, but as a green mana source. Or if you have a ramp spell and then you want to ramp again, you can cast the Balaged Recovery, get the ramp spell, and cast it again. So it's very situational in how you'll use it. If you board wipe and then you notice that, oh, they're rebuilding really quickly, then casting Regrowth on an austere command and recasting austere command will keep everyone down once again. So it's all about controlling the board just so that nothing gets out of hand. You also want to be able to put lands into play at instant speed. Again, if you're able to do this at end of turn, then you have basically the ability to, well, activate the world tree at your turn or on your turn. So you have Llanowar Scout, Seedborn Muse, Crop Rotation, Growth Spiral. Sylvan Scrying is a sorcery, but it also enables you to get the world tree. So that's also an option. It's not instant, but it does let you go off with it. That gives you access to the card itself. So Seedborn Muse is not an instant land, but if you cast the World Tree and you follow it up with a Seedborn Muse, when your next opponent untaps and you have the mana, during their upkeep, you can actually activate the World Tree and it just goes off. The combo goes off. Now, Seedborn Muse definitely a target for removal, and that's okay. Like, you only need to untap with her once. That's the value of it. Next, distraction. So, as I mentioned, Seedborn Muse, target for removal, and there's some use to that. If your opponent casts a counter or removal spell on this, then it's one less removal spell that you'll need to worry about. So distractions are Scoot Swarm and Tatiova, Benthic Druid. Again, you could perhaps win with Scoot Swarm if you have Impact Tremors out, but that's unlikely because of how much hate Scoot Swarm draws. And chances are you're gonna be wiping the board a lot anyway, so Scoot Swarm's gonna be gone. And Tatiova, while it can get you some value, this will draw removal. So the moment you cast Tatiova, they will have to counter it to stop you from getting any value, especially if you haven't played a land for turn. So very good target, something that will basically keep your opponents from stopping all the other things that you want to do. So let's talk about lands. So utility lands, I like these five. I keep them. Maybe Kirkkeep not as often, but the others I do keep them very handy. Emergent Zone, very important in case you want to cast Golos at end of turn. Then you can get the World Tree and untap, and you have the ability right there. Kirkkeep, I'm not so sure if I want to keep. It's under $1 right now. It's good because it creates blockers, but other than that, as I said, this is a Bant deck, so it's an activated ability that's not in the primary colors of the deck. So I'm still debating on whether I want to swap Kirkkeep with just a basic. So I'm testing the deck. It's been winning games, but Kirkkeep has been largely just another colorless land. Maybe it draws target removal from let's say a Ghost Quarter, like I say that it shows here, or Strip Mine. But Ghost Quarter is also really good because uh, it does target problematic lands in case you're playing against someone that has a, let's say, a Gaia's Cradle or anything else, an Urborg. So it stops those decks. It slows them down. Or if you really need the fixing, you can just target one of your own lands and get the mana. Of course, you're putting yourself one mana down, but uh, if you really need the fixing, let's say you need the double white for a board wipe, then Ghost Quarter can help you out as well. Of course, you have the gates, because this is again, Golos gates is also a viable strategy. So you have all the gates plus Gateway Plaza, not the fastest card, but it's an additional gate, not the fastest land card, but it's there in case someone gets wise and removes one of the gates. Then you still have Gateway Plaza as a backup for your gates victory, your Maze's End victory. And finally, you have the usual suspects. You have Command Tower, Exotic Orchard. And as I mentioned, this is a Bant-based deck. So 6 forests, 4 plains, 3 islands, 2 mountains, and 1 swamp. So I'm thinking again of swapping Kirkkeep with another swamp. But so far, a black mana source has not been a problem. I don't have any black spells aside from Death to the Deathless. And it's been working out so far. So we'll see. And that has been my my take on Golos. Golos big mana with a combo for the World Tree. If you like this video, please do subscribe, leave a comment. If you have any questions, the deck list is available in the description down below. And if you want to learn more about this sort of deck building, let me know. I have a few staples. I've built several dozens of decks already at this point that operate under these parameters: $100 designed to win, of course $100 excluding the commander. So this isn't the only 5-color deck that I have. I also have a lot of other interesting decks, so be on the lookout for those. Thanks for your time, and happy shuffling.